Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. I do hope that you are doing well and everyone that you live with is as well. So we're looking at a series about fairness, and today we're going to be thinking about wealth and poverty, rich and poor. So I'd like to call this a mirror mind map. Never called it that in my life before, but I thought I would do this time. So we're going to do a mirror mind map. As you can see, what's on the left is on the right. As simple as that. And so what I'd like you to do is to grab your pen and paper and to write down rich and poor, and write down who might be rich in the world in terms of location, what might rich countries look like, when might someone be rich, where might they live, why do you think what you do, why might they be rich, and think the same about the poor. So think about poor countries, but also be thinking about people that you might know to be poor, or people that you perceive to be poor, should I say. So get started with that. I'm going to put the cheesy intro music on and then come back to me. Okay, so you may need to pause me to get that task done, but I think that's a really good starting point for you just to get an idea of your perception of rich and poor before we continue. As always, do pause me as we go. I'm going to be moving on. So, wealth and poverty is our title today, and we're going to consider the meaning of poverty and its impact and Christian response to it as well. Let's go through our outcomes then. It's going to be good if you can define what poverty is and say why it may occur. It's going to be great if you can explain some of the arguments for and against helping out others out of poverty. And it's going to be even better if we can reach a reasoned conclusion if people have an ethical or religious duty to help them end poverty as well. So we're going to present some different viewpoints. That's our literacy skill and a big question we're going to be answering later. We're going to be reflecting on why the world is as the world is, and we're also going to be thinking about what's socially acceptable and what's the right or wrong thing to do. During today's session then, we are going to think about lost, we're going to think about poverty, ethics, worksheet and reflection as well. So let's just think about this for a second. There was a TV show that came out quite a number of years back now called Lost. And the concept was this, that there was a bunch of people on a desert island because their aeroplane had crashed, and they basically were lost and no one knew where they were. 7 series. It was a long, hard slog, and where the story ended up, it was very different than where it started at the start of series 1. But don't let me put you off Lost. I'd like you to think for a moment, if you were lost on a desert island, what would you miss the most and why? So pause me now while you bounce some ideas off some of your friends, maybe make a few notes in your book, and then come back to me. Okay, so many people in this country have so many possessions that they couldn't imagine life without them. You know, I'm sure in your house alone you'll have a fridge, probably a TV, probably a DVD player, or a Netflix subscription, a computer, mobile phone, maybe an iPod or some sort of MP3 player. You might even have a dishwasher. I want you to think about these 3 questions then. I want you to choose 2 items that you could not live without and explain why. Then, if you had to live without one of them, which would you choose? And in your opinion, what do you think are the basic needs for life? So you're going to need to pause me now while you get those 3 questions down or write in full sentences, and then come back to me. So pause me now while you get those done. Brilliant. So basic needs for life are basically food, water and shelter. Anything more than that you wouldn't class necessarily as a need. They're the only three things that technically we need. And when I say shelter, I don't necessarily mean a house, but that's obviously quite useful. So my next thought then is what causes poverty? Okay, poverty is where people are lacking what they need to thrive, to live well and to thrive. So have a think about that for a moment, maybe make a few notes down if you need to. What causes poverty in your opinion? Okay, so the three main reasons for poverty are population growth, as in there's too many people living in an area, war, which can displace people, or the sale of raw materials at low prices. In other words, people are in a position that they they have to sell things at a price which is much lower than the cost it takes to produce, and therefore they don't have enough income. So population growth, war and sale of raw materials. I wonder what else you got down with your ideas there. And there are obviously other reasons for poverty as well. So we said it'd be good if you could define what poverty is, and we've talked about poverty as being without things that you need to survive. We're great if you can explain some of the arguments for and against helping people. Now we need to unpack that a little bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to just turn to my dear friend Hank. I say dear friend, I wish he was. I wish that my YouTube channel was just as good as his. Show a lot of A-level stuff that he does in Crash Course Philosophy, but I just thought this was brilliant and perfect for what we need to do. So a moral duty is something that you have to do, something that you feel obliged to do to help other people out. So the question is, do we have a moral duty to get involved and help people out? And that's what Hank's going to discuss here. So I'd just like you to watch this. This is a little extract from what Hank's done on poverty and moral duty. And I think this will get you to think a little bit more. So let's watch this now. Over to Hank.
UNICEF estimates that 12 children who live in extreme poverty die every minute of every day. They die because they don't have access to clean water, they die because they don't have enough to eat, they die of malaria or of intestinal worms, something we don't even let our pets suffer from. It's a horrifying truth, and what's maybe even more horrifying is that these deaths are easily preventable. For $3, a child could get a mosquito net for her bed that would protect her from malaria. To cure her of intestinal worms, a dose of medicine costs less than 50 cents. As for food, you could probably feed her with the loose change in your pocket. We have this money. I definitely have it. You probably do. So why are all of these children dying? The United States is an affluent country. We have enough money to easily stop world poverty. Just end it. But why should we? Why should I give any of my hard-earned money to strangers I will never meet? What entitles them to a portion of what I have? Thinking about world poverty and whether we have an obligation to do something to stop it really comes down to questions of obligation. Most of us don't know anyone who's living in extreme, life-threatening poverty. The victims of that kind of poverty aren't our family or our friends. So according to an ethics of care, as we discussed last time, we have no real obligation to those people. Or if we do, it's much, much less than the obligation we have to those who are near and dear to us. So many people argue that we simply don't have any obligation to help strangers in need. We didn't make them poor and we never agreed to help them, so if we do choose to help, that's great, but such actions are supererogatory. They go above and beyond the call of moral duty. In this view, giving money to charity is like getting moral extra credit. If you do it, you can go ahead and pat yourself on the back, but if you don't, you have no reason to feel bad about it. Contemporary Australian philosopher Peter Singer thinks differently, however. To see how, let's head over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. Singer offers a thought experiment that has seen many variations over the years, but a basic version goes like this. Imagine you're walking to class feeling pretty good about how great you look in your brand new $200 shoes, and soon you pass by a shallow pond. Suddenly, you notice a small child flailing in the water. No one else is around, the pond is shallow, but the child has lost her footing and she can't get her head above water. As you watch, the flailing stops. You realize There's very little time. You could easily wade into the water and pull her to safety, but if you take the time to remove your shoes, it'll be too late. You know the muddy water will ruin your new purchase. So what do? Singer's pretty sure that we'd all give the same answer. Shoes are replaceable. That child's life is not. So none of us would think twice about running in to save her. But what exactly would be wrong if you decided not to save the child? Singer says it comes down to costs and benefits. The cost of your shoes is so low compared to the value of the child's life that it would be appalling not to make that sacrifice, to value shoes over a person's life. But here's the thing. We know children are dying right now, 12 every minute, and yet we do nothing. So what's the difference, Singer asks, between a life in front of us and a life halfway around the world? A life is a life, and both the child in the pond and a child dying of malaria are equally innocent. If we do wrong in failing to save the child in the pond, Singer argues we do equally wrong in failing to save some of those children who we know are dying right now. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Singer argues that if you can prevent great harm at a little cost to yourself, you should do it. And when you look at it like that, it's hard to disagree with him. But his thought experiment points out some huge inconsistencies in our moral thinking. Most of us don't feel the weight of obligation to help dying children we can't see, but at the same time, we think we would have an obligation to help a dying child right in front of us. What does it matter whether we can see the child or not? Some people argue the difference is that in the thought experiment, there's no one else around. You're the only one who can help, so you must. But what if there were many people standing around the pond, but no one else was willing to save the child? Would that make your inaction more excusable? Why would it? Singer argues that it doesn't matter what everyone else is doing. You are in control of you and of your actions. So if you see a need and you know you can help, you must, even if there are others who could, but don't. Now, is it fair for you to have to bear the burden of helping while others sit idly by? No. It's not fair at all. But fair doesn't really matter in this case. What matters is whether or not you choose to take action to prevent great harm at little cost to yourself. Whether you alone watch the child drown or you and a crowd of people watch her drown, either way, you've failed spectacularly as a moral agent. And Singer says the same goes for world poverty. If everyone in America donated just 1% of their income to help people in extreme poverty, we could save so many lives. Now we know that everyone isn't going to do that, but according to Singer, each of us is responsible for our failure to help, regardless of what everyone else is doing.
Okay, now you've seen that, maybe make a couple of notes in your book. Do you think we've got a moral duty to get involved? And we're going to come back to this later, but maybe make a few notes now while you're thinking about that. Okay, the next task then that we're going to do is you'll find a link in the description below, so please access that. And there's a worksheet there for you to complete. Now there are some more tasks to go after this, so let's carry on with this lesson. Let's get that worksheet complete. Give yourself 20 minutes or so to do that, and then bounce back to me. Okay, so charity begins at home. What do we think? Do we agree or disagree that actually our first priority needs to be to help the people that we live with? So I'd like you to come up with a list of reasons that would agree with this statement and reasons that would disagree with that statement. Try and come up with 2 or 3, because this is going to really help us with our next task. So again, pause me now and try and come up with a list of reasons why helping, making sure that your money stays at home is more important or less important than helping other people out. Okay, as this is an RE lesson, it's really helpful to put a few other Bible quotes in. So here's some quotes from the Bible. Do any of these fit that you could use either for or against? And there certainly are some there. Which ones would you now add to your table? Okay, so I'd be thinking treat others like to be treated, love your neighbour, created in God's image, possibly love the Lord your God as well. Okay, so let's see what we're doing with that table now. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to do an answer to that question, a couple of paragraphs there, using the format that's on the screen above me there. So you'll need to pause, but give yourself sort of 10 minutes to do this. And then there's a final task for you to be getting on with if you've got the opportunity to, depending on how long your lesson is. So let's just get this task done and then come back to me. Brilliant. So what we've done then, we said we could define what poverty is and why it may occur. I think hopefully we've got that sort of boxed off now. Great if you talk about some of the arguments about helping people out of poverty, and that was our moral duty thoughts. And this ethical and religious duty to help end poverty is sort of what's coming through from the work that you've just done and some of the other thoughts of today. So we're going to end with this. I would like you to come up with a Stop Poverty poster. You know how long you've got left of this lesson. This task is to show an awareness of how poverty could maybe be stopped. Think about the work you did this lesson and maybe last lesson as well to help with that about fairness. So I'm going to leave that there. Please photograph everything. Please send it through to your teachers. Obviously, we'd like to see what you have done. Thanks very much for your time. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. Wash hands. God bless you. And I'll be seeing you soon.